welcome. You've made it to this quiet moment at the end of your day. As you settle in, let your thoughts slow down. Let the noise of the day fade, little by little. Tonight, we're going to take a gentle journey back in time, out onto the Great Plains, an endless stretch of land where the horizon feels close and the sky touches the earth. In winter, this land could be unforgiving. Winds swept across the open fields, and nights grew long and cold. But here, families lived in Tipis homes, carefully shaped for both warmth and comfort. These weren't just shelters, they were spaces of safety, of tradition, of resilience. Over the next while, we'll move slowly through their story. We won't rush. We'll simply notice how these homes worked, how people stayed warm, and how generations passed down the knowledge that made life possible in such a harsh place. So breathe a little deeper. Let yourself relax as the story of the Tipi begins. Deep within the heart of every Tipi, a small circle of carefully arranged stones held embers that would burn from the first autumn frost until the last spring snow melted away. This central fire served as the spiritual and social focal point of family life, the place where children learned stories and adults shared the quiet wisdom of winter evenings. The fire pit was positioned with precision that had been refined over generations of practical experience. Dug into the earth directly beneath the smoke hole at the Tipi's peak, this shallow depression created a natural draft that drew smoke upward while radiating heat outward in all directions. The circular arrangement of stones that lined the pit served multiple purposes beyond simple fire containment. These stones absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly throughout the night, providing thermal mass that helped maintain steady temperatures even when the flames burned low. The flames themselves were kept deliberately small, rarely rising more than a foot above the ground. This was not the roaring bonfire one might expect, but a controlled, efficient source of warmth that could burn steadily for hours on a handful of fuel. The size of the fire was carefully calibrated to the interior space of the teepee, providing adequate heat without overwhelming the ventilation system or consuming precious fuel unnecessarily. Around this sacred center, life revolved in gentle circles that reflected both practical necessity and cultural tradition. Family members arranged themselves according to age and status, with elders positioned closest to the warming flames and children nestled safely within the circle of adult protection. The fire's glow created a pool of light that pushed back the darkness beyond the hide walls, transforming the interior space into something warm and alive, despite the frozen world that lay just a thin layer of buffalo skin away. The continuous presence of fire meant that someone was always responsible for its care, a responsibility that rotated among family members according to well-established patterns. This duty connected each person to the survival of the whole family, creating rhythms of tending that ensured the flames never died and the warmth never failed. The firekeeper learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when fuel needed to be added, when airflow required adjustment, and when the banking of coals for overnight burning should begin. The fuel added to these central fires was chosen with the care of a master craftsman selecting tools. Dried buffalo chips formed the foundation of most winter fuel supplies, their dense composition providing long-lasting heat with minimal smoke production. These chips burned with a steady, intense flame that was perfect for the enclosed environment of the teepee, producing the sustained heat needed for winter survival, without filling the air with the choking smoke that would make the space uninhabitable. When available, carefully selected pieces of wood supplemented the buffalo chip foundation. Cottonwood, when dry, provided quick heat for cooking and rapid warming during the coldest periods, while other hardwoods might be saved for special occasions or emergency situations. The combination of different fuel types allowed families to adjust their heat production according to changing conditions and specific needs. The successful maintenance of the central fire was a source of deep satisfaction and security for the entire family. Each evening, as the flames danced in their circle of stones, family members could rest assured that their most essential survival system was functioning properly. The fire represented their continued ability to transform the harsh environment into a space of warmth and comfort, a daily affirmation of their skills, preparation, and connection to the wisdom of their ancestors. The failure to maintain fire could quickly become a life-threatening emergency, particularly during severe weather when rekindling might be impossible. This knowledge created a culture of careful attention to fire management, where every family member understood their role in ensuring the flames never died. The central fire was more than a heating system. It was the heart of the home, the symbol of family unity, and the foundation upon which winter survival depended. The knowledge of keeping warm in tipis was held primarily by women, an inheritance passed down through generations of mothers teaching daughters the intricate skills of winter survival. This wisdom encompassed far more than simple fire-building techniques. It involved understanding the subtle relationships between wind direction and smoke flow, the optimal positioning of hide walls to maximize heat retention, and the countless small adjustments that transformed a basic shelter into a warm, comfortable home. Women owned the tipis themselves, a responsibility that carried profound significance within Plains cultures. This ownership was not merely symbolic but represented genuine authority over one of the most critical survival technologies available to nomadic peoples. The woman of the household made the fundamental decisions about where to position the family dwelling within the winter camp, considering complex factors including prevailing wind patterns, natural drainage, proximity to water sources, and the social dynamics of community layout. Their knowledge of the land was both extensive and precise, gained through years of experience, setting up homes in different locations and under varying weather conditions. Women understood how subtle differences in terrain could affect wind flow around a teepee, how the positioning of the entrance could influence interior air circulation, and how the relationship between individual dwellings and the larger landscape could impact the overall effectiveness of heating systems. The construction of the teepee required specialized knowledge that women guarded and transmitted carefully. They understood which buffalo hides worked best for different parts of the structure, recognizing that hides from animals killed at different seasons possessed varying characteristics important for winter survival. Fall and winter hides, with their thick fur and dense leather, provided superior insulation, while summer hides might be more suitable for other purposes or used as interior linings where different properties were required. The preparation and treatment of these hides demanded considerable skill and experience. Women knew how to process the skins to maintain their flexibility in extreme cold, understanding that improper treatment could result in hides that became brittle and prone to cracking when temperatures dropped. They mastered techniques for waterproofing that would prevent moisture penetration while maintaining the material's ability to breathe, ensuring that the teepee cover would shed rain and snow while allowing the escape of interior moisture that could create condensation problems. Women also managed the complex systems of insulation and bedding that kept families warm through the long winter nights. Their work extended far beyond simply arranging buffalo robes on the ground. They understood how different types of fur and hide performed under various conditions, how to layer materials for maximum insulation efficiency, and how to create sleeping arrangements that maximized shared body heat while maintaining individual comfort and family privacy. The collection and preparation of plant materials used for floor insulation represented another area of specialized women's knowledge. They knew which grasses retained their insulating properties longest when dried, which plants provided the best protection against ground moisture, and how to harvest and store these materials to ensure they remained effective throughout the winter months. The dried sage, sweetgrass, and other aromatic plants they used served multiple purposes, providing insulation while also repelling insects and creating pleasant scents during the long months when fresh air circulation was limited. The teaching of these essential skills was a gradual process that began in early childhood and continued throughout a woman's life. Young girls accompanied their mothers and aunts as they gathered materials, learning to recognize the plants and other resources that would be needed for winter survival. They observed the daily routines of fire tending, space management, and equipment maintenance, slowly absorbing the countless details that made the difference between comfort and hardship during the harsh winter months. As girls matured, they took on increasing responsibilities in the management of winter heating systems. They learned to adjust smoke flaps according to changing wind conditions, to bank fires for overnight burning, and to arrange bedding systems for maximum warmth efficiency. This hands-on education ensured that by the time a woman established her own household, she possessed not just theoretical knowledge, but the practical skills and intuitive understanding that came from years of direct experience. The education of children in the arts of winter survival was woven seamlessly into the fabric of daily life, creating learning experiences that were both natural and comprehensive. From their earliest years, children absorbed the rhythms and requirements of staying warm through careful observation and gradual participation in family routines. This education was not formal or structured in the modern sense, but rather emerged from the gentle guidance of elders who understood that survival knowledge must become as natural and instinctive as breathing. Young children began their education by helping with simple tasks that connected them to the essential work of maintaining warmth, while teaching them to observe the subtle changes in weather, fire behavior, and interior conditions that would guide their decisions throughout their lives. They gathered dried grasses for floor coverings, learning to recognize which plants provided the best insulation and how to collect them without damaging the root systems that would produce next year's harvest. The collection of kindling became a child's first real responsibility in fire management. Under careful supervision, young ones learned to identify the types of small wood and plant matter that caught fire easily and burned hot enough to ignite larger fuel. This seemingly simple task taught them to distinguish between different materials, to understand the relationship between moisture content and burning characteristics, and to plan ahead for the needs of the family fire. Children learned to read the smoke rising from their family's teepee, understanding that changes in color, density, or direction indicated different conditions that might require adult attention. They observed how the adjustment of smoke flaps affected the draw of the fire, how wind direction influenced smoke dispersal, and how the behavior of flames provided information about airflow patterns within the dwelling. Boys and girls learned different aspects of winter survival, though both gained understanding of the complete system that kept families warm and safe. Boys focused more heavily on the structural and mechanical aspects of teepee heating, learning about pole arrangement, hide tensioning, and the physics of wind flow around the conical structure. They practiced adjusting the exterior smoke flap poles, work that required venturing outside in harsh weather, and understanding the complex relationship between wind direction and optimal smoke dispersal. Girls concentrated more intensively on interior management systems, learning the intricate knowledge of bedding arrangement, fuel selection, and the social dynamics of shared winter spaces. They mastered the art of layering buffalo robes and other furs to create maximum warmth, understanding how to position different materials to trap body heat, while allowing for air circulation that prevented overheating during periods of more intensive heating. Elders served as the ultimate repositories of winter survival wisdom, the men and women who had survived the most winters and understood the subtle variations that could make the difference between comfort and suffering, between survival and death. Their knowledge encompassed not just standard procedures, but also the emergency techniques needed when normal systems failed, or when extreme weather demanded adaptations to basic survival strategies. The stories told by elders contained layers of practical wisdom embedded within entertaining narratives. Tales of successful survival during particularly harsh winters transmitted specific information about emergency procedures, resource conservation, and adaptation techniques. Stories of hunting expeditions taught young people about animal behavior patterns that could help predict weather changes, while accounts of travel between winter camps provided guidance about reading landscape features and understanding regional variations in climate patterns. The learning process extended across many winters, with each season bringing new challenges and opportunities to apply developing skills. Children who had helped gather materials one year might take responsibility for maintaining fire during certain periods the next, gradually assuming greater roles in the complex work of keeping their families warm and safe. This progression ensured that knowledge was thoroughly internalized before greater responsibilities were assumed. By adulthood, individuals possessed not just technical knowledge, but the intuitive understanding that allowed them to make quick, correct decisions based on years of accumulated experience. They could read subtle changes in wind patterns, predict weather developments from minimal cues, and adapt their heating strategies to meet unusual or extreme conditions. This deep understanding made the difference between merely surviving winter and thriving despite its challenges. The teaching process also emphasized the social aspects of winter survival, helping young people understand that staying warm was a community effort that required cooperation, resource sharing, and mutual support. Children learned not just how to manage their own family's heating systems, but also how to assist neighbors, share resources during emergencies, and maintain the community relationships that provided security for everyone during the most challenging periods of the year. Winter survival was never an individual or even a single family effort. Entire communities worked together through the autumn months to ensure that every household would have the materials, knowledge, and support necessary to stay warm through the cold season. This collective preparation created bonds of mutual dependence that strengthened social ties, while dramatically improving everyone's chances of successful survival through the harsh plains winter. The preparation process began with communal decisions about winter camp locations, choices that required extensive knowledge of regional geography, weather patterns, and resource availability. Tribal leaders and experienced elders would travel across the landscape during late summer and early autumn, evaluating potential sites according to multiple criteria that would determine the success or failure of the entire winter survival effort. Protection from wind was perhaps the most critical factor in site selection. The plains were notorious for their fierce, unrelenting winds that could make life miserable even inside well-constructed tipis. Winter camps were positioned in river valleys, behind natural ridges, or in other locations that provided natural windbreaks capable of reducing the force of the prevailing westerly winds that dominated plains weather patterns. The effectiveness of these windbreaks could mean the difference between moderate heating requirements and the exhausting battle against constant heat loss that characterized exposed locations. Access to water sources that would not freeze completely represented another essential consideration. Winter camps needed to be positioned near streams, springs, or other water sources that would continue to provide liquid water throughout the coldest months. The knowledge of which water sources remained active during severe cold and how to access water even when surface ice formed was critical information that guided site selection decisions. Fuel availability in the surrounding area was carefully evaluated before final site selection. While communities brought substantial supplies of buffalo chips and other materials with them to winter camps, the ability to supplement these stores with locally available wood, additional dried dung, or emergency fuel sources could prove essential during unexpectedly harsh or prolonged winter conditions. Experienced leaders knew how to assess the fuel potential of different areas and factor this availability into their decision-making process. The organization of collective gathering expeditions represented one of the most important aspects of community winter preparation. Groups of women and children, often accompanied by men for protection and transportation assistance, would spend days or even weeks collecting the materials needed for winter warmth. These expeditions required careful coordination to ensure that adequate materials were collected to supply the entire community, while avoiding over-harvesting that might damage the ecosystem or reduce future availability. Buffalo chip collection was perhaps the most extensive and important of these gathering activities. Communities would organize expeditions that covered vast distances, following the trails of buffalo herds and collecting the dried dung that would fuel their winter fires. The work was physically demanding, requiring long days of walking across the prairie and the lifting and carrying of heavy loads of fuel. Specialized containers made from buffalo hides or woven grass were developed to maximize the efficiency of this collection work. The timing of these gathering expeditions was critical to their success. Buffalo chips needed to be thoroughly dried to burn efficiently, but chips that had weathered too long might disintegrate or lose their fuel value. Communities needed to time their collection activities to gather chips that had dried properly, without waiting so long that wind and weather degraded the quality of the fuel. Plant material gathering represented another major community effort, requiring coordination between multiple families to ensure adequate supplies of insulating materials for floor coverings, bedding supplements, and emergency uses. Women with specialized knowledge led these expeditions, teaching younger community members to recognize useful plants and understand optimal harvesting techniques that would provide maximum material while ensuring continued plant health and future availability. The sharing of resources and knowledge created networks of mutual support that extended beyond individual families to encompass entire communities and even relationships between different tribal groups. Experienced families helped newcomers understand the specific requirements of winter preparation in particular geographic areas, while those with abundant materials shared with families who might be struggling to gather enough supplies for successful winter survival. These resource-sharing networks operated according to well-established cultural protocols that balanced individual family needs against community welfare. Families with successful gathering expeditions were expected to provide assistance to those who had been less fortunate, while community members who could not participate fully in gathering activities due to age, illness, or other circumstances received support from stronger, more capable households. The preparation process also included community-wide training and knowledge-sharing sessions, where experienced elders passed on essential winter survival techniques to younger community members. These informal educational activities ensured that critical knowledge was widely distributed throughout the community, reducing the risk that essential skills might be lost if key individuals became incapacitated during the winter months. The relationship between plains peoples and the vast buffalo herds that dominated the grasslands extended far beyond simple hunting and resource extraction. This partnership represented a complex ecological and cultural relationship that had evolved over countless generations, creating a system where human survival strategies were intimately connected to the behavior, movements, and life cycles of these massive animals. Buffalo provided the essential raw materials that made winter warmth possible in teepee dwellings. The thick, shaggy winter coats of these animals were perfectly adapted to plains conditions, having evolved over millennia to provide superior insulation against the extreme cold, fierce winds and temperature fluctuations that characterize the region's harsh winters. A single buffalo hide, properly prepared and utilized, could provide the covering for an entire family's teepee, while additional hides became bedding, clothing, and covering materials that created multiple layers of protection against winter cold. The timing of buffalo hunts was crucial for securing materials with optimal winter heating properties. Late autumn hunts provided hides with the thickest winter fur, essential for maximum warmth during the coldest months of the year. Families carefully planned their movements to intersect with buffalo herds at these optimal times, using their understanding of the animals' seasonal migration patterns to ensure they could secure the materials needed for winter survival. The preparation of buffalo hides for winter use required extensive knowledge and considerable labor, much of it performed by women who possessed specialized skills in hide processing. The treatment process began immediately after the kill, with careful skinning techniques that preserved the maximum amount of fur while avoiding damage to the hide itself. The processing continued through multiple stages of cleaning, scraping, and treatment with specialized materials that would preserve the hide's flexibility and water resistance while maintaining its insulating properties. Beyond providing shelter materials, buffalo behavior served as a sophisticated weather prediction system that helped communities make critical decisions about winter preparation and survival strategies. Experienced hunters and elders observed how herds responded to approaching storms, noting changes in grazing patterns, movement directions, and social behavior that indicated shifting weather conditions. This knowledge allowed communities to anticipate severe weather and take appropriate protective measures before dangerous conditions developed. The seasonal migration patterns of buffalo herds influenced many aspects of human winter survival planning. Communities timed their movements to take advantage of optimal hunting opportunities, while also considering the need to reach appropriate winter camp locations before severe weather made travel dangerous. The knowledge of where buffalo herds spent their winter months also influenced human site selection, as areas that provided adequate protection and resources for buffalo were likely to offer similar advantages for human communities. The dried dung left by buffalo herds across their grazing ranges became one of the most important fuel sources available to plains peoples. These chips were abundant throughout the buffalo range, renewable on an annual basis, and perfectly suited to the specific requirements of tipi heating systems. They burned slowly and steadily, producing intense heat with minimal smoke and leaving very little ash residue that would need to be cleaned from fire pits. The collection of buffalo chips required understanding the movement patterns of herds and the environmental factors that affected the quality and availability of this fuel source. Fresh chips needed time to dry thoroughly before they would burn efficiently, while chips that had been exposed to weather for too long might disintegrate or lose their fuel value. Communities developed sophisticated knowledge about optimal collection, timing, and storage techniques that would preserve fuel quality throughout the winter months. The spiritual and ceremonial relationship with buffalo also influenced winter survival practices in profound ways. Many Plains tribes believed that the animals shared their life-sustaining resources willingly, but only when humans maintained proper spiritual relationships and followed appropriate protocols for hunting, processing, and utilization of buffalo products. This belief system encouraged sustainable hunting practices and respectful use of materials, ensuring that the partnership between humans and buffalo could continue across generations. Ceremonial activities associated with buffalo hunting and processing reinforced the sacred nature of this relationship, while transmitting practical knowledge about optimal techniques for securing and preparing winter survival materials. These ceremonies served multiple functions, honoring the animals that provided essential resources while teaching younger community members the skills and attitudes necessary for successful winter survival. The integration of buffalo-derived materials into every aspect of winter heating systems demonstrated the completeness of this interspecies relationship, from the hide covers that formed the outer shell of Tipis to the fur bedding that insulated sleeping areas, from the leather containers that stored fuel to the sinew that bound structural elements together. Buffalo products were woven throughout the technology that made winter survival possible. The annual cycle of Plains life revolved around rhythms that had been refined over centuries of adaptation to the demanding environment of the grasslands. These seasonal patterns coordinated human activities with natural cycles, ensuring that communities were fully prepared for winter's arrival, while maintaining the mobility essential for following game herds across the vast distances of their territory. Summer months were devoted to intensive preparation and gathering activities that would provide the foundation for winter survival. Families traveled extensively during this period, following buffalo herds while simultaneously collecting the diverse materials they would need to stay warm during the cold months ahead. This dual focus required careful planning and coordination, as communities needed to balance their hunting and gathering activities with the constant movement necessary to remain near the buffalo herds that provided their primary livelihood. The collection of materials during summer required understanding which resources were available during different seasons and how to harvest them at optimal times for maximum effectiveness. Prairie grasses used for floor insulation needed to be cut when they had reached full growth, but before seed heads had dispersed and stems had become brittle. Medicinal and aromatic plants were gathered when their essential oils were most concentrated, ensuring maximum effectiveness when used during winter months. Buffalo hunting during summer focused not only on securing immediate food needs, but also on obtaining materials that would be essential for winter survival. Summer hides, while not as thick as winter coats, were useful for many purposes and could be processed during the warmer months when working conditions were more favorable. Summer hunting also provided opportunities to secure specialized materials like sinew for sewing and binding, bones for tools, and other products that would be needed during winter, equipment construction and maintenance. Autumn brought the critical transition period when communities began shifting from the extensive mobility of summer to the more settled existence required for winter survival. This transition required careful timing, as communities needed to complete final hunting and gathering activities, while ensuring they reached appropriate winter camp locations before severe weather made travel dangerous or impossible. Late autumn hunting expeditions focused specifically on securing the thick winter buffalo robes that would provide essential insulation during the coldest months. These hunts required considerable skill and careful planning, as the animals needed to be killed and processed under increasingly challenging weather conditions. The timing of these final hunts was critical, as hides taken too early in the season might not have developed full winter thickness, while hunting too late risked being caught by severe weather before processing could be completed. The establishment of winter camps marked a fundamental change in the rhythm of community life. Communities that had spent months in almost constant movement now settled into locations where they would remain for several months, focusing their energy on the intensive work of staying warm and fed through the cold season. This transition required not only physical preparation but also psychological adjustment to the different social dynamics and daily routines that characterized winter life. Winter itself brought rhythms dictated by the essential requirements of maintaining warmth and conserving resources. Daily routines developed around the critical tasks of fire tending, fuel management, and equipment maintenance. Longer cycles governed the careful consumption of stored food and materials, as families needed to balance current comfort against the requirement to make resources last through the entire winter season. The social rhythms of winter differed significantly from the more dispersed patterns of summer life. Extended periods of close confinement in small spaces required different approaches to conflict resolution, resource sharing, and community decision-making. Winter was traditionally a time for intensive cultural activities, including storytelling, ceremony, and the transmission of traditional knowledge that might be difficult to pursue during the demanding travel and hunting seasons. Spring represented renewal and the gradual return to mobility as weather conditions began to improve. The timing of spring departure from winter camps required careful judgment, as leaving too early could expose communities to dangerous late-season storms, while remaining too long might mean missing optimal conditions for spring hunting and travel to summer ranges. The preparation for spring travel began weeks before actual departure, as families needed to evaluate and repair equipment that had been used intensively during the winter months. Tipi covers were inspected for damage from wind and weather, pole frameworks were checked for structural integrity, and heating systems were prepared for storage and transport to the next year's winter camp location. The collection of materials for winter survival was governed by elaborate traditions that had evolved over generations to ensure efficiency, sustainability, and community cooperation. These gathering practices represented far more than simple resource collection activities. They involved intricate knowledge of seasonal timing, plant and animal ecology, and social protocols that governed access to different types of materials across the landscape. Buffalo chip collection represented perhaps the most extensive and organized gathering activity undertaken by plains communities. These expeditions required careful planning and coordination, as they often covered vast distances and involved large numbers of people working together over extended periods. The success of these collection efforts could determine whether families had adequate fuel for winter survival, making them among the most critical activities of the entire annual cycle. The organization of buffalo chip gathering expeditions typically followed established patterns that had been refined through generations of experience. Groups were organized around extended family networks, with experienced women leading teams that included younger women learning essential skills, and children old enough to contribute meaningfully to the work. Men provided protection during these expeditions and assisted with transportation, but the actual collection work was primarily performed by women and children, who possessed the detailed knowledge needed to identify and gather the best quality fuel. The timing of these expeditions was determined by complex factors, including the movement patterns of buffalo herds, weather conditions, and the stage of drying reached by chips from previous grazing periods. Fresh buffalo dung needed adequate time to dry thoroughly before it would burn efficiently, but chips that had been exposed to weather for too long might disintegrate or lose their heating value. Communities needed to time their collection activities precisely to gather fuel that had reached optimal condition. The development of specialized tools and containers for buffalo chip collection demonstrated the importance and complexity of this activity. Large baskets woven from prairie grasses or containers, constructed from buffalo hides, were designed specifically for efficient collection and transport of fuel materials. These tools needed to be both strong enough to carry heavy loads and light enough to be practical during long collection expeditions across difficult terrain. Plant material gathering required different strategies and specialized knowledge, as various materials needed to be collected at specific times to achieve optimal quality for winter use. Prairie grasses for floor insulation were cut during narrow windows, when they had reached full growth but retained maximum flexibility and insulating properties. The cutting needed to be done carefully to avoid damaging root systems that would produce next year's harvest. Sage and other aromatic plants were collected not only for their insulating properties, but also for their ability to repel insects and provide pleasant scents during the long winter months, when fresh air circulation was necessarily limited. The harvesting of these plants required understanding optimal cutting techniques that would provide maximum yield while ensuring continued plant health and regeneration. The sustainable harvesting practices that governed plant collection demonstrated sophisticated understanding of ecological principles and long-term resource management. Communities understood the carrying capacity of different areas and developed rotation systems that prevented overharvesting while ensuring adequate materials would be available for future years. This knowledge was transmitted through practical experience and storytelling that embedded conservation principles within cultural traditions. Sharing protocols governed the distribution of gathered materials according to well-established cultural rules that balanced individual family needs against community welfare. Families with successful gathering expeditions were expected to share with those who had been less fortunate, while elders and other community members who could not participate fully in the physically demanding collection work received support from younger, stronger households. The gathering expeditions also served important social functions beyond simple resource collection. These activities provided opportunities for knowledge transmission, as experienced gatherers taught younger community members to recognize useful materials and understand optimal collection techniques. The shared work created bonds between families and reinforced community relationships that would be essential for mutual support during the challenging winter months. Emergency gathering procedures were also established for situations when normal collection activities had been inadequate or when unexpected circumstances required additional materials. Communities maintained knowledge of alternative fuel sources and emergency plant materials that could supplement primary supplies during particularly harsh or prolonged winter conditions. The arrangement of winter camps represented a complex planning process that balanced practical considerations related to heating efficiency with social requirements and cultural protocols. The positioning of individual tipis within the larger community layout could significantly affect everything, from protection against harsh weather to the maintenance of family relationships and tribal hierarchies throughout the challenging winter months. Site selection for winter camps began with careful evaluation of natural protection features that would reduce heating requirements and improve living conditions for the entire community. River valleys provided natural windbreaks that could dramatically reduce the heating load on individual tipis by protecting them from the fierce, constant winds that characterize plains weather. These valleys also often contained stands of trees that could provide additional fuel sources and further wind protection. The specific positioning of camps within selected valleys required understanding of microclimatic factors that could affect comfort and safety. Areas with good drainage were essential to prevent the accumulation of standing water from snowmelt or winter precipitation. Sites needed to be elevated enough to avoid flooding but low enough to gain protection from surrounding terrain features. The relationship between camp positioning and prevailing wind directions was carefully considered to maximize protection while ensuring adequate air circulation for tipi heating systems. Access to water sources represented another critical factor in camp layout decisions. Winter camps needed to be positioned near streams, springs, or other water sources that would continue to provide liquid water throughout the coldest months. The knowledge of which water sources remained active during severe cold and techniques for accessing water, even when surface ice formed, guided the positioning of camps and influenced the internal layout of individual family areas. The arrangement of tipis within winter camps followed traditional patterns that had been refined over generations to optimize both practical heating considerations and social relationships. Families were positioned according to their kinship relationships and status within the tribe, creating neighborhoods of related households that could provide mutual support while maintaining appropriate distances for privacy and safety. Wind direction and protection were primary considerations in determining the specific positioning of individual tipis within the camp layout. Families with more experience or higher status might receive positions that offered superior natural protection, while the overall arrangement was designed to ensure that the tipis of some families did not block wind protection for others. The goal was to create a layout where every household could maintain effective heating systems without imposing additional burdens on neighboring families. Fire safety considerations influenced the spacing between individual tipis and the arrangement of family areas within the larger camp. Families needed to be close enough to provide mutual assistance during emergencies and to facilitate the social interactions that made winter bearable, but far enough apart to prevent fires from spreading between dwellings. The positioning also needed to account for the direction of prevailing winds that could carry sparks or spread fires rapidly through closely spaced structures. Community facilities and shared spaces were integrated into camp layouts to facilitate collective activities while minimizing heat loss and exposure to harsh weather. Larger tipis, designated for ceremonies, meetings, and community gatherings, were positioned centrally where they could be easily accessed by all families. Work areas for activities like hide processing, tool making, and equipment repair were located where they could be shared efficiently while taking advantage of natural protection features. The organization of fuel storage and resource sharing areas was carefully planned to ensure equitable access, while protecting valuable materials from weather and theft. Community fuel supplies might be stored in locations that were convenient for all families, while being positioned to avoid contamination from drainage or exposure to excessive moisture. Individual family storage areas were arranged to provide security, while allowing for the sharing and redistribution of resources that characterized Plains winter survival strategies. Drainage patterns within winter camps were carefully managed to prevent the accumulation of water that could create muddy, unhealthy conditions or threaten the integrity of heating systems. Natural drainage was enhanced through the strategic positioning of tipis and the creation of channels or berms that would direct water away from living areas. The camp layout took advantage of natural slope and terrain features while creating artificial drainage improvements where necessary. Each day in the winter camp began with the crucial ritual of rekindling the central fire, a morning routine that established the rhythm for the entire day, while providing both the physical warmth and psychological reassurance that families needed to face another day of winter survival. This daily renewal of the essential flame represented far more than simple fire management. It symbolized the continuation of life, warmth, and hope despite the harsh conditions that surrounded each small circle of comfort. The firekeeper, a responsibility that typically rotated among capable family members, according to established patterns, would rise before dawn to tend the carefully banked embers from the previous night. These preserved coals represented the unbroken thread of warmth that connected each day to the next throughout the entire winter season. The skill required to bank fires properly for overnight survival was considerable, requiring precise understanding of fuel types, airflow patterns, and the delicate balance needed to keep embers alive without wasting precious materials or creating safety hazards. The process of rebuilding the morning fire followed established patterns that had been refined through countless generations of practical experience. Small pieces of carefully prepared kindling were added gradually to the glowing embers, with meticulous attention paid to airflow and positioning that would encourage combustion without smothering the delicate flames. The fire was built up slowly and deliberately, allowing each stage to establish steady combustion before additional or larger pieces of fuel were introduced. The selection of morning fuel represented a careful balance between immediate heating needs and long-term resource conservation. Buffalo chips were typically preferred for their steady burning characteristics and minimal smoke production, but precious pieces of wood might be added when rapid heating was needed during especially cold mornings or when cooking requirements demanded different burning properties. The firekeeper needed to consider not only current conditions but also the day's anticipated activities and the family's remaining fuel supplies. The morning fire served multiple essential purposes beyond simple heating. It provided the light needed for early morning activities when natural illumination was limited, creating a pool of warm brightness that made other tasks possible. The flames provided the heat necessary for preparing the first meal of the day, warming food and drink that would help family members maintain their internal body temperature throughout the day's activities. The central fire also served as a natural gathering point for family members as they began their daily routines, creating a shared space where plans could be discussed, responsibilities assigned, and social connections maintained during the challenging period of winter survival. The gathering around the morning fire reinforced family unity while providing opportunities for the transmission of practical knowledge and cultural traditions that were essential for successful winter survival. The smoke rising from successfully rekindled morning fires served as a visual signal to other families throughout the camp, indicating that households were awake, functioning normally, and successfully maintaining their essential heating systems. This visual communication was particularly important during severe weather periods, when families might be confined to their tipis for extended periods and normal social interaction was limited. The successful rekindling of the morning fire provided a sense of accomplishment and security that helped establish a positive psychological foundation for facing the day's challenges. Each morning's success represented a renewed demonstration of the family's ability to maintain the fundamental systems that made survival possible, reinforcing confidence in their skills, preparation, and capacity to endure whatever hardships the day might bring. The failure to successfully rekindle the morning fire could quickly escalate into a life-threatening emergency, particularly during severe weather, when obtaining help from neighboring families might be difficult or impossible. This knowledge created intense focus and careful attention during the morning fire routine, as family members understood that their continued survival depended on successfully maintaining this essential daily rhythm. The morning fire routine also established the pattern for fuel consumption throughout the day, as the firekeeper made initial decisions about how intensively to heat the teepee based on weather conditions, planned activities, and available fuel supplies. These early morning decisions influenced not only immediate comfort, but also the family's ability to maintain adequate heat throughout the remainder of the day and into the following night. The maintenance of winter warmth in Tipi communities required the coordinated efforts of family members across all ages and capabilities, creating a system of shared responsibility that ensured no single person bore the entire burden of survival, while providing opportunities for skill development and meaningful participation by every member of the household. This distribution of duties was both practical and educational, teaching essential survival skills while creating redundancy that protected families against the incapacitation or loss of key individuals. Children participated in winter heating maintenance through carefully structured, age-appropriate tasks that gradually increased their understanding and capability while contributing meaningfully to family survival efforts. Young children might be responsible for gathering small pieces of kindling from supplies stored inside the tipi, learning to recognize the types of material that caught fire easily, and understanding the critical importance of keeping fuel dry and readily accessible for quick use during emergencies. As children matured, their responsibilities expanded to include more complex tasks that required greater judgment and skill. Older children took on duties such as monitoring fire behavior throughout the day, learning to recognize when additional fuel was needed, and understanding how different types of material affected flame characteristics and heat production. They learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when smoke flaps needed adjustment, developing the observational skills that would serve them throughout their lives. The education of children in fire management extended beyond simple task completion to include understanding the underlying principles that made heating systems effective. They learned why certain arrangements of fuel produced better heat, how airflow affected combustion efficiency, and how weather conditions influenced optimal fire management strategies. This deeper understanding prepared them for the independent decision-making they would need as adults responsible for their own family's survival. Adult men typically handled the heavier and more dangerous aspects of maintaining winter warmth systems. This included cutting and splitting wood when trees were available in the vicinity of winter camps, work that required considerable physical strength and skill with tools while often taking place under challenging weather conditions. Men also took responsibility for maintaining the structural integrity of the teepee framework, ensuring that poles remained properly positioned and secure despite the stresses imposed by wind and weather. The adjustment of exterior smoke flap poles represented another primary male responsibility, Work that required venturing outside in harsh weather conditions and understanding the complex relationship between wind direction, weather patterns, and optimal smoke flow management. This task demanded not only physical capability, but also sophisticated knowledge of how atmospheric conditions affected air movement around and through the Tipi structure. Women managed many of the most complex and critical aspects of winter comfort systems, including the arrangement and ongoing maintenance of bedding systems that kept families warm through long winter nights. Their responsibilities encompassed understanding how different types of fur and hide performed under various temperature and humidity conditions, how to layer materials for maximum insulation efficiency, and how to create sleeping arrangements that maximize shared body heat while maintaining individual comfort and appropriate family privacy. The preparation and storage of plant materials used for insulation represented another area of specialized women's knowledge and responsibility. They understood which grasses and other plants retained their insulating properties longest when dried, how to arrange these materials to provide optimal protection against ground cold, and how to maintain and refresh these systems throughout the winter as materials compressed or degraded with use. Women also bore primary responsibility for the intricate work of maintaining proper airflow within the Tipi, understanding how the positioning of the interior liner affected ventilation patterns and how small adjustments to this system could dramatically improve heating efficiency. Their knowledge of how different arrangements affected air circulation was essential for maintaining the delicate balance between adequate heat retention and sufficient fresh air circulation. Elders served as advisors and repositories of specialized knowledge, sharing their accumulated understanding of weather prediction, emergency procedures, and the subtle techniques that could make the difference between comfort and hardship during extreme conditions. Their experience was particularly valuable during unusual weather events, or when standard procedures needed to be modified for changing circumstances that younger family members had not previously encountered. The knowledge held by elders encompassed not only technical skills, but also the wisdom to recognize when conditions required departures from normal routines. They understood how to assess the severity of approaching weather, when to implement emergency conservation measures, and how to modify heating strategies when fuel supplies became inadequate or when equipment failures threatened family safety. The sharing of responsibilities created essential redundancy in survival skills, ensuring that families could continue to maintain adequate warmth even if key individuals became ill, injured, or otherwise unable to perform their normal duties. Multiple family members understood each critical process well enough to substitute for others when necessary, providing security against the various emergencies that could threaten survival during harsh winter conditions. This redundancy was particularly important given the confined living conditions and health challenges that could affect Tipi communities during winter months. Respiratory illnesses, injuries from outdoor work, and other medical problems could quickly incapacitate individuals who normally played essential roles in maintaining family heating systems. The distribution of knowledge and responsibility across multiple family members provided protection against these potentially catastrophic disruptions. The rotation of certain responsibilities, particularly the demanding work of firekeeping during overnight hours, prevented the exhaustion and burnout that could result from placing excessive burdens on single individuals. Family members shared the physical and mental demands of constant vigilance, ensuring that essential tasks were performed consistently without overwhelming any individual's capacity to contribute effectively. The careful conservation and strategic use of fuel represented perhaps the most critical aspect of winter survival in Tipi communities, requiring sophisticated planning, disciplined consumption patterns, and complex decision-making that balanced immediate comfort needs against the requirement to make finite resources last through months of continuous burning. Families entered the winter season with limited supplies of buffalo chips, wood, and other combustible materials that constituted their entire heating capacity until spring weather permitted resupply. The storage of fuel within winter camps was organized according to principles that protected materials from moisture while maintaining accessibility during storms and extreme weather conditions, when venturing outside might be dangerous or impossible. Buffalo chips were carefully stacked in covered areas, where natural or constructed shelters would prevent them from absorbing moisture that could dramatically reduce their burning efficiency and heat output. The construction of fuel storage areas required understanding of drainage patterns, wind exposure, and other environmental factors that could affect the quality of stored materials. Storage sites needed to be positioned where they would remain dry during rain and snowmelt while being accessible from family tipis, even during severe weather conditions. The knowledge of how to construct effective storage systems using available materials was essential for maintaining fuel quality throughout the winter months. Wood storage presented different challenges, as this fuel source was often more valuable and required different protection strategies. The best pieces of wood were carefully protected from moisture and reserved for specific uses such as cooking or emergency heating when maximum heat output was essential. The arrangement of wood storage needed to facilitate easy access to different types and sizes of fuel while protecting the entire supply from weather degradation. Daily fuel consumption was carefully monitored and regulated to ensure that supplies would last through the entire winter season without forcing families to choose between adequate warmth and conservation for future needs. Families developed sophisticated systems for rationing their fuel supplies, using different materials for different purposes, and adjusting consumption based on weather conditions, planned activities, and remaining supply levels. The monitoring of fuel consumption required understanding the burning characteristics of different materials and their appropriate uses under various circumstances. Buffalo chips provided steady, long-lasting heat with minimal smoke production, making them ideal for overnight burning when fires needed to maintain temperature without constant attention. Wood provided quicker heat and higher temperatures for cooking and rapid warming, but consumed fuel more rapidly and required more active management. Families developed detailed knowledge of how much fuel was required to maintain adequate heat under different weather conditions, allowing them to predict consumption rates and adjust usage patterns accordingly. This planning required balancing multiple factors, including outside temperature, wind conditions, humidity levels, and the planned activities that would affect heating requirements throughout each day. The efficient use of fuel required mastering techniques that maximized heat output while minimizing waste. This included understanding optimal arrangements of burning materials, proper airflow management that ensured complete combustion, and timing strategies that coordinated fuel addition with changing heating needs throughout daily and nightly cycles. Emergency fuel sources were identified and prepared as backup resources that could extend primary fuel supplies during unexpectedly harsh weather or other circumstances that increased consumption beyond planned levels. These alternative sources might include dried plant materials, animal fat, or other combustible materials that could supplement conventional fuels when standard supplies became inadequate. The knowledge of how to locate, prepare, and use emergency fuel sources was part of the essential survival wisdom that distinguished experienced winter survivors from those who might not endure extreme conditions. This knowledge included understanding which plants burned effectively, how to prepare animal fat for fuel use, and how to modify burning techniques to accommodate alternative materials with different combustion characteristics. Fuel sharing between families provided additional security against shortages, while strengthening community bonds and mutual support networks. Communities developed informal but effective systems for redistributing resources when some families faced shortages, while others maintained surplus supplies. These sharing arrangements ensured that no family would be forced to choose between immediate warmth and conservation for future survival. The protocols governing fuel sharing balanced individual family needs against community welfare, creating systems that encouraged conservation while providing security for all community members. Families with abundant supplies were expected to assist those facing shortages, while community members understood their obligations to contribute to mutual support efforts when they had adequate resources. The long winter nights around Tipi fires became treasured times for sharing the oral traditions that preserved cultural knowledge and strengthened family bonds through the challenging months of cold and confinement. These storytelling sessions served multiple essential purposes, providing entertainment during periods when outdoor activities were severely limited, while transmitting crucial information about survival techniques, historical events, and spiritual beliefs that formed the foundation of Plains culture. The central fire created a naturally intimate gathering space that encouraged conversation and shared activities while providing the warm, comfortable environment necessary for extended storytelling sessions. Family members would arrange themselves in comfortable positions around the flames, with elders typically taking prominent positions where their voices could be easily heard by all participants. The warm glow of the fire and the comfortable temperature, maintained by the Tipis heating systems, created ideal conditions for the patient. Detailed storytelling that characterized Plains oral traditions, the positioning around the fire followed cultural protocols that reflected family relationships and social hierarchies, while ensuring that everyone could participate comfortably in the shared experience. Children were positioned where they could clearly hear the stories while remaining warm and secure within the circle of adult protection. The arrangement also facilitated the interactive nature of many traditional narratives, where audience participation and response were important elements of the storytelling process. Stories told during winter evenings often contained multiple layers of meaning, with entertaining surface narratives embedding practical survival information, historical knowledge, and spiritual teachings within memorable formats that ensured accurate transmission across generations. Tales of successful hunts taught young people about animal behavior, weather prediction, and hunting strategies, while providing exciting entertainment that held attention during long winter nights. The embedding of practical information within entertaining stories represented a sophisticated educational technique that made essential knowledge memorable and enjoyable to learn. Stories of survival during particularly harsh winters transmitted specific information about emergency procedures, resource conservation techniques, and adaptation strategies that might be needed when normal survival methods proved inadequate. Historical narratives shared during winter storytelling sessions preserved community memory of important events, migrations, and cultural developments that defined tribal identity and provided context for current practices and beliefs. These stories maintained connections to ancestral wisdom while helping community members understand their place within the larger sweep of Plains history and cultural development. The timing and rhythm of storytelling sessions were carefully adapted to the daily routines and energy levels that characterized winter life in Tipi communities. Stories might begin during evening meal preparation, providing entertainment while families worked together on necessary tasks. The narratives would continue during the long hours after dark when other activities were limited, and could be resumed during periods when severe weather confined families to their tipis for extended periods. The flexibility of the oral tradition allowed storytellers to adapt their presentations to current circumstances, emphasizing elements that were particularly relevant to immediate conditions or community needs. During periods of fuel shortage, stories might focus on conservation techniques and emergency procedures. When community tensions arose, narratives might emphasize cooperation and mutual support themes that helped restore social harmony. Spiritual and ceremonial stories told during winter gatherings reinforced cultural values and maintained connections to religious traditions that provided meaning and comfort during the physically and emotionally challenging winter months. These narratives helped sustain the spiritual well-being of community members while transmitting the complex theological and philosophical concepts that formed the foundation of Plains religious life. The interactive nature of many traditional stories encouraged participation from listeners, particularly children who were learning to understand and eventually tell these narratives themselves. This participation helped ensure accurate transmission while making the storytelling process more engaging and memorable for all involved participants. The social aspects of winter storytelling created opportunities for community bonding that helped maintain positive relationships during the stressful period of winter confinement. Shared laughter, emotional responses to familiar narratives, and the comfortable intimacy of firelit gatherings helped families and communities maintain the social cohesion essential for successful winter survival. The warm, protected environment created by effective Tipi heating systems played a crucial role in caring for sick, elderly, and vulnerable members of Plains communities, providing controlled conditions that promoted healing while offering comfort for those who struggled with the physical and emotional challenges of harsh winter weather. The sophisticated climate control achieved through traditional heating methods created therapeutic environments that supported recovery from illness while maintaining the health of entire families. The central heating system of the Tipi provided particular benefits for respiratory ailments that were common during winter months when cold air, reduced ventilation, and close living quarters could contribute to the spread of illness. The clean air circulation created by the liner and smoke flap system ensured that occupants breathed fresh air rather than the stale, contaminated atmosphere that might develop in poorly ventilated spaces or structures without sophisticated air management systems. The steady, moderate heat maintained by well-managed Tipi heating systems helped patients maintain proper body temperature during illness, when natural temperature regulation might be compromised. The controlled environment prevented the dangerous temperature fluctuations that could worsen illness, while providing the stable conditions that supported natural healing processes. Traditional healing practices were specifically adapted to take advantage of the Tipi's controlled environment and sophisticated heating systems. Medicinal plants could be burned in the central fire to create therapeutic vapors that patients could inhale for respiratory relief. The warm, dry conditions were ideal for preparing and storing herbal remedies that required specific temperature and humidity conditions to maintain their effectiveness. The privacy and quiet atmosphere of winter tipis provided appropriate settings for the detailed care and careful observation that healing often required. Patients could rest undisturbed while family members monitored their condition and provided continuous care without the distractions and exposures that might interfere with recovery in less controlled environments. Elderly community members, who often struggled with the physical demands of maintaining adequate body heat in harsh conditions, found essential refuge in the consistently warm environment of well-managed tipis. Families frequently adjusted their winter heating arrangements to ensure that elders received priority access to the warmest positions near the central fire, while providing them with additional bedding and coverings needed to maintain comfort throughout the challenging winter months. The care of elderly community members during winter reflected both practical necessity and cultural values that emphasized respect for those who had contributed their knowledge and labor to community welfare throughout their lives. The warm environment of tipis made it possible to provide this care effectively while maintaining the dignity and comfort that elders deserve during their final years. Children, who were particularly vulnerable to cold-related injuries and illnesses due to their smaller body mass and less developed temperature regulation systems, benefited significantly from the stable temperature and clean air circulation of well-managed Tipi environments. The controlled conditions reduced their risk of exposure-related health problems, while providing safe spaces for the extended periods of rest and recovery that childhood illnesses often required. The psychological benefits of warm, secure Tipi environments were as important as the physical advantages for promoting healing and maintaining mental health during challenging winter months. The sense of safety and comfort provided by effective heating systems helped maintain morale and emotional stability, supporting both physical healing processes and the psychological resilience needed to endure the various stresses of winter survival. Family members caring for sick relatives benefited from the comfortable working conditions created by effective heating systems, allowing them to provide continuous care without exposing themselves to dangerous cold that might compromise their own health. The warm environment made it possible to maintain hygiene, prepare medications, and perform other care activities that would be difficult or impossible in unheated spaces. The integration of healing practices with winter heating systems demonstrated the sophistication of Plains' approaches to health maintenance that recognized the fundamental connections between environmental conditions, physical comfort, and successful recovery from illness. The knowledge of how to modify heating systems to support healing represented specialized expertise that was particularly valued during the vulnerable winter months, when illness could quickly become life-threatening. The warmth provided by winter tipis created appropriate settings for spiritual practices and ceremonies that sustained Plains communities through the challenging cold months, demonstrating how practical survival technologies were seamlessly integrated with religious and cultural activities that maintained community spiritual health. The controlled environment created by effective heating systems allowed for extended, focused ceremonial activities while providing comfort for participants during lengthy ritual observances that might otherwise be impossible in harsh winter conditions. Sacred fires burned within ceremonial tipis held significance that extended far beyond their practical heating function, serving as focal points for spiritual activities while maintaining the warm conditions necessary for effective ceremony. These ritual flames were often kindled from embers preserved from previous ceremonies, creating spiritual continuity that connected current practices to ancestral traditions and reinforced the sacred nature of the fire that provided both spiritual and physical sustenance. The preparation of ceremonial fires required specialized knowledge and techniques that differed from everyday heating practices, as these flames needed to serve spiritual purposes while maintaining the practical function of keeping participants warm during extended ritual activities. The selection of fuel for ceremonial fires often involved specific materials that produced particular scents, flame characteristics, or burning properties considered appropriate for different types of spiritual observance. The clean air circulation systems that made Tipi suitable for daily winter living proved equally important for ceremonies that involved burning sacred plants, incense, or other ritual materials that created atmospheric conditions appropriate for spiritual observances. The smoke management capabilities that prevented everyday fires from creating unhealthy interior air also ensured that ceremonial fires could burn safely while producing the specific environmental conditions required for various religious practices. Winter ceremonies often took advantage of the intimate scale and controlled environment of teepee interiors, creating settings for family and small group rituals that complemented the larger community. Ceremonies typically held during warmer months, when outdoor gatherings were more practical. The warm private space allowed for detailed spiritual practices that might be difficult to maintain in exposed outdoor locations during harsh weather conditions. The seasonal timing of winter ceremonies was influenced by the protected environment that tipis provided, as extended periods of confinement during severe weather created opportunities for intensive spiritual practice that might not be available during the more active seasons. The comfortable conditions allowed participants to engage in lengthy ceremonial activities without the physical hardship that might interfere with spiritual focus and religious experience. The integration of heating systems into ceremonial practices reflected the deep connection between practical survival skills and spiritual beliefs that characterized plains cultures. The same knowledge and techniques that kept families warm through harsh winters also created the conditions necessary for maintaining spiritual traditions and community religious life during the most challenging periods of the annual cycle. Ceremonial heating arrangements often required modifications to standard tipi heating systems to accommodate larger numbers of participants or special requirements of particular rituals. These adaptations demonstrated the flexibility of traditional heating technologies while showing how practical survival systems could be modified to serve broader community spiritual needs. The warmth provided by ceremonial fires contributed to the psychological and emotional effects of spiritual observances, creating comfortable conditions that supported the relaxation and focus necessary for effective religious practice. The combination of physical comfort and spiritual activity helped participants achieve the mental states appropriate for ceremony, while maintaining the health and safety of everyone involved. The training of younger community members in ceremonial heating practices represented another important aspect of cultural transmission that took place during winter months, when time was available for detailed instruction. Young people learn not only the practical techniques of maintaining ceremonial fires, but also the spiritual significance and cultural meaning of these practices that would guide their religious participation throughout their lives. The customs surrounding the sharing of warmth with visitors and travelers reflected deeply held cultural values about community responsibility and mutual support that transcended individual family welfare and created networks of assistance, extending across vast distances of the plains. These hospitality traditions represented more than simple courtesy. They embodied essential survival strategies that provided security for all community members, while strengthening the social bonds that made plains civilization possible. The obligation to share warmth with visitors was considered sacred and inviolable, overriding personal comfort and convenience, while demonstrating the fundamental values that governed plains social relationships. Families would willingly rearrange their sleeping areas, adjust their fuel consumption patterns, and modify their daily routines to accommodate unexpected guests. Understanding that survival in harsh conditions required mutual cooperation and support that extended beyond immediate family relationships. The practical aspects of winter hospitality required careful management of resources and space that tested families' planning skills and demonstrated their commitment to community values. Additional guests meant increased demand for fuel to maintain adequate heating throughout the tipi, as well as the need to provide bedding, food, and other necessities for unexpected visitors who might arrive with limited personal supplies. Families developed systems for extending their heating capacity to accommodate visitors while ensuring that their own survival was not compromised by excessive generosity. These systems included techniques for maximizing fuel efficiency, methods for arranging bedding to accommodate additional people, and strategies for sharing food and other resources without depleting family supplies below levels needed for continued survival. The protocols governing guest behavior during winter visits established appropriate expectations for both hosts and visitors that ensured hospitality arrangements remained sustainable while maintaining social harmony during potentially stressful periods of resource scarcity. Visitors were expected to contribute to the work of maintaining warmth, helping with fuel gathering, fire tending, and other essential tasks that demonstrated their appreciation while reducing the burden on host families. Guest participation in heating maintenance created opportunities for knowledge sharing and cultural exchange that enriched the experience of winter confinement while strengthening inter-community relationships. Visitors brought news from other areas, shared techniques and innovations they had learned during their travels, and contributed to the intellectual and social life of winter communities through stories, songs, and other cultural activities. The sharing of warmth created networks of reciprocal obligation that provided security for families who might need assistance during their own travels or emergency situations. Groups known for their willingness to share resources and provide hospitality were more likely to receive similar treatment when they traveled, creating systems of mutual support that extended across vast distances and different tribal territories. The reputation for hospitality became an important aspect of community identity and survival strategy that influenced relationships between different groups and affected the success of trade, intermarriage, and other activities that required cooperation between communities. Families and tribes known for their generosity and willingness to assist travelers gained respect and favorable treatment that provided practical advantages during negotiations and other interactions. The winter hospitality traditions also served educational functions, exposing children and young adults to different cultural practices and survival techniques that broadened their knowledge while demonstrating the importance of cooperation and mutual assistance. These experiences helped young people understand their obligations to the broader Plains community while preparing them for their own travels and interactions with other groups. The integration of hospitality practices with winter heating systems required sophisticated understanding of resource management and social dynamics that demonstrated the complexity of Plains survival strategies. The ability to maintain warmth while accommodating guests represented mastery of both technical skills and cultural values that characterized successful Plains communities. Winter emergencies tested the resilience of tipi heating systems and the knowledge of families who depended on them for survival, requiring rapid adaptation and the application of specialized techniques that separated experienced winter survivors from those who might not endure extreme conditions. The ability to respond effectively to heating system failures, severe weather events, and resource shortages often determined whether families survived particularly harsh winter periods. Fire emergencies represented some of the most serious threats to winter survival, as the accidental extinguishing of central fires during severe weather could quickly escalate into life-threatening situations where hypothermia became a real danger within hours or even minutes. Families maintained emergency fire-starting materials and mastered multiple techniques for rekindling flames under adverse conditions when normal fire-starting methods might prove inadequate. The preparation for fire emergencies included maintaining supplies of specially prepared tinder and kindling that would ignite easily, even under difficult conditions, as well as backup fire-starting tools that could function when primary methods failed. Families practiced emergency fire-starting techniques during less critical periods, ensuring that all capable family members could rekindle fires quickly when faced with actual emergencies. Structural damage to tipis during severe storms required immediate repair capabilities to prevent the loss of heat and the exposure of occupants to dangerous conditions that could quickly prove fatal. The knowledge of emergency patching techniques, the stockpiling of repair materials, and understanding of how to reinforce damaged frameworks represented essential skills that families needed to survive unexpected equipment failures. Emergency repair techniques included methods for temporarily patching holes in hide covers using available materials, techniques for stabilizing damaged pole frameworks until permanent repairs could be made, and strategies for maintaining heating effectiveness, even when structural integrity was compromised. These skills required understanding of how tipi heating systems functioned and how various types of damage affected their performance. Fuel shortages during unexpectedly harsh or prolonged winters forced families to implement emergency conservation measures and seek alternative heating sources that could extend their supplies until weather conditions improved or resupply became possible. These situations required difficult decisions about resource allocation and acceptable risks that tested families' judgment and survival skills. Emergency fuel conservation techniques included methods for reducing heating requirements through improved insulation, techniques for maximizing heat output from limited fuel supplies, and strategies for identifying and utilizing alternative fuel sources that might be available in the local environment. The knowledge of how to burn unusual materials safely and effectively could mean the difference between survival and disaster when conventional fuel supplies became inadequate. Medical emergencies during winter required adaptation of standard healing practices to the confined conditions and limited resources available in winter camps. Serious injuries or illnesses that might be manageable during warmer months became more challenging when families were isolated by severe weather and confined to small spaces for extended periods without access to specialized medical assistance. The management of medical emergencies in winter tipis required understanding of how to modify heating systems to support healing while maintaining comfort for other family members. This included techniques for creating warmer areas for patients, methods for managing air quality when medicinal plants were burned for treatment, and strategies for maintaining hygiene and cleanliness under confined conditions. Community response to winter emergencies demonstrated the interconnected nature of plain survival strategies and the importance of mutual assistance during critical situations. Families facing crisis situations could expect support from neighbors and relatives, while successful households understood their obligations to assist those in need when their own situations permitted such assistance. The coordination of community emergency response required communication systems that functioned even during severe weather when normal social interaction was limited. Visual signals, messenger systems, and other communication methods allowed families to request assistance and coordinate mutual aid efforts that could provide life-saving support during critical situations. The networks of mutual aid that ensured no family lacked essential fuel, materials, or knowledge for staying warm represented sophisticated systems of resource management that had evolved over generations of winter survival experience. These sharing networks extended beyond immediate family groups to encompass entire communities and even maintained relationships between different tribal groups that provided security against various types of resource shortages and emergency situations. Fuel sharing arrangements represented perhaps the most critical aspect of winter resource networks, as adequate heating capacity was essential for survival, and families with insufficient fuel faced immediate life-threatening situations. Communities developed detailed protocols for redistributing fuel supplies, when some families faced shortages while others maintained adequate or surplus supplies, ensuring that heating capacity was maintained across the entire community. The assessment of fuel needs and available supplies required careful monitoring and honest reporting that allowed communities to identify developing shortages before they became critical. Families were expected to provide accurate information about their fuel consumption rates and remaining supplies, while community leaders coordinated redistribution efforts that balanced individual needs against overall community welfare. Material sharing extended to all components needed for effective winter heating systems, including hides for Tipi repair, insulating materials for bedding improvements, and tools needed for heating system maintenance. Families with surplus materials were expected to provide assistance to those whose equipment had been damaged or whose original supplies had proven inadequate for the winter's demands. The protocols governing material sharing established clear expectations about both giving and receiving assistance while maintaining respect for individual family property rights and decision-making authority. These arrangements encouraged conservation and careful resource management, while providing security for all community members who might face equipment failures or resource shortages. Knowledge sharing represented an equally important aspect of winter survival networks, particularly for families new to specific winter locations or facing unusual weather conditions that required adaptations to standard heating techniques. Experienced families provided guidance about local wind patterns, optimal teepee positioning strategies, and the availability of emergency resources in the surrounding area. The transmission of specialized knowledge included techniques for maximizing heating efficiency under local conditions, methods for locating and utilizing alternative fuel sources, and strategies for adapting heating systems to unusual weather patterns that might require departures from standard operating procedures. This information transfer was essential for successful adaptation to new environments and changing conditions. Labor sharing helped families manage the intensive work required to maintain winter heating systems when individual households lacked adequate human resources to perform all necessary tasks. Young people might assist elderly neighbors with fuel gathering and fire maintenance, while families with many capable members provided help to households with fewer available workers. The coordination of labor sharing required understanding of each family's capabilities and needs, while respecting individual autonomy and decision-making authority. These arrangements ensured that essential tasks were completed throughout the community without creating unsustainable burdens on any particular families or individuals. Emergency assistance protocols established clear procedures for requesting and providing help during crisis situations, when immediate assistance could mean the difference between survival and disaster. These systems included methods for communicating emergency needs, criteria for prioritizing assistance when multiple families required help simultaneously, and procedures for coordinating community response to major emergencies affecting multiple households. The long-term sustainability of resource-sharing networks depended on maintaining balance between giving and receiving assistance that ensured no families became permanent dependents, while everyone contributed according to their capabilities. These systems encourage self-reliance and careful preparation while providing security against the various emergencies and shortages that could threaten individual family survival during harsh winter conditions. Different plains tribes developed significant variations in their warming techniques based on local environmental conditions, available resources, and cultural preferences that had evolved over generations of experience in specific geographic regions. These adaptations demonstrated the fundamental flexibility of basic teepee heating principles, while illustrating how traditional technologies could be modified and refined to meet specific regional challenges and take advantage of locally available resources. Northern tribes, who regularly faced more severe winter conditions including extremely low temperatures and heavy snow loads, often developed enhanced insulation systems and modified heating techniques specifically designed to cope with these extreme conditions. Their adaptations might include double-layer hide coverings that created additional insulation, specialized windbreaking structures positioned around winter camps to provide extra protection, and the use of different fuel combinations optimized for very low temperature conditions. The development of enhanced insulation systems by northern tribes included techniques for creating air gaps between multiple hide layers, methods for utilizing additional plant materials to increase insulation effectiveness, and strategies for positioning tipis to take maximum advantage of natural protection features. These adaptations required modifications to standard construction techniques while maintaining the essential ventilation and heating principles that made Tipi systems effective. Southern Plains groups adapted their warming systems to address different weather patterns, including the possibility of sudden temperature changes, ice storms, and other climatic challenges that were less common in northern regions but presented unique difficulties for heating system management. Their techniques often emphasized rapid heating and cooling capabilities that allowed for quick adjustments to changing conditions. The adaptations developed by southern tribes included techniques for rapidly increasing heat output when temperatures dropped suddenly, methods for managing heating systems during ice storms that could affect fuel supplies and structural integrity, and strategies for dealing with the high humidity and temperature fluctuations that characterized southern plains winter weather patterns. Tribes with access to different types of fuel developed specialized burning techniques optimized for their available materials and local environmental conditions. Groups located near forested areas might rely more heavily on wood-burning systems, with techniques adapted to different types of available timber, while tribes in areas with limited wood developed enhanced methods for utilizing buffalo chips and alternative plant materials. The optimization of heating techniques for specific fuel types required understanding of how different materials burned under various conditions and how to adjust airflow, fuel arrangement, and fire management strategies to maximize efficiency. These adaptations often involved modifications to Tipi design and construction that improved performance with particular fuel types. Regional variations in Tipi construction reflected adaptations to specific environmental challenges that characterized different areas of the Great Plains. Tribes in regions with distinctive wind patterns might modify the asymmetrical design of their tipis to provide better stability, while groups facing unique precipitation patterns developed specialized techniques for water management and drainage around their winter camps. Construction adaptations included modifications to pole arrangements that provided better stability under specific wind conditions, changes to hide cover designs that improved water shedding or wind resistance, and alterations to interior arrangements that optimized heating effectiveness under particular environmental conditions. The exchange of adaptation strategies between tribes created opportunities for innovation and improvement in winter survival techniques that benefited all groups involved in these cultural interactions. Intertribal marriages, trade relationships, and other forms of cultural contact allowed successful innovations to spread across tribal boundaries, improving survival capabilities for multiple communities. Innovation, diffusion through cultural contact, resulted in hybrid techniques that combined successful elements from different tribal traditions while adapting them to local conditions and available resources. This process of cultural exchange and technological adaptation contributed to the continuous improvement and refinement of plains winter survival strategies. Cultural preferences and traditional practices also influenced the development of regional adaptations that reflected different approaches to balancing heating effectiveness with other cultural values. Some tribes emphasized techniques that maximized fuel efficiency, while others prioritized methods that supported particular social arrangements or ceremonial practices that were important to their cultural identity. The maintenance of fires and monitoring of conditions during vulnerable overnight hours required systematic approaches that ensured continuous warmth while minimizing risks associated with unattended burning throughout the long winter. Nights. These nighttime routines were absolutely critical to survival, as the failure to maintain adequate heat during the coldest hours could quickly escalate into life-threatening situations when outdoor temperatures dropped far below freezing and families were most vulnerable to heat loss. Night watch duties were typically rotated among capable family members, according to established schedules that ensured someone was always responsible for monitoring fire conditions and making necessary adjustments to fuel supplies and air flow management. The assignment of watch duties considered each family member's skills, physical capabilities, and other responsibilities, while ensuring that the most critical overnight periods were covered by the most experienced and reliable individuals. The watchkeeper bore responsibility for maintaining fire conditions that would provide adequate heat throughout the night, while conserving fuel and ensuring safe burning that would not create hazards for sleeping family members. This required understanding of how to balance heat output against fuel consumption, while monitoring fire behavior for signs that might indicate developing problems or the need for adjustments. The techniques for banking fires for overnight burning represented specialized knowledge that required precise understanding of fuel types, airflow patterns, and the combustion characteristics needed to maintain glowing embers throughout the night without allowing flames to die completely. Properly banked fires would provide steady radiant heat for hours, while consuming fuel slowly enough to last until morning when active fire management could resume. Banking techniques varied according to available fuel types and specific weather conditions, as different materials required different approaches to achieve optimal overnight burning. Buffalo chips could be arranged to burn slowly and steadily, while wood required different stacking patterns and airflow management to achieve similar results. The watchkeeper needed to understand these differences and adapt techniques according to available materials. Night watch responsibilities extended beyond simple fire maintenance to include comprehensive monitoring of weather conditions and structural integrity that could affect family safety throughout the night. Watchkeepers needed to remain alert for changes in wind direction that might require adjustment of smoke flaps, accumulation of snow that could threaten structural stability, or other developing conditions that might require immediate action or preparation for morning repairs. The monitoring of weather conditions during night watch included observing wind patterns, snow accumulation, and temperature changes that might require modifications to heating strategies or preparation for more intensive heating requirements during particularly cold periods. Watchkeepers learned to recognize subtle signs that indicated developing weather changes that might affect heating needs or require emergency preparations. Emergency procedures for nighttime crises were practiced and thoroughly understood by all family members capable of implementing them effectively. These procedures included techniques for rapidly rebuilding extinguished fires using emergency materials, methods for managing structural emergencies during severe weather, and protocols for seeking assistance from neighboring families when problems exceeded the capability of individual households to resolve independently. The development of emergency response capabilities for nighttime situations required training and practice during less critical periods when mistakes would not prove catastrophic. Families practiced fire-starting techniques under difficult conditions, tested emergency communication methods, and rehearsed procedures for various types of nighttime emergencies that might threaten their survival. The social and psychological aspects of night watch duties provided opportunities for individual reflection and spiritual practice during quiet hours, when other family members slept peacefully in the warmth provided by carefully maintained heating systems. These solitary periods were often valued for prayer, meditation, and personal contemplation that balanced the intensive social interaction and cooperation that characterized most aspects of winter community life. The responsibility of night watch often rotated among family members, providing everyone with opportunities to contribute to family survival while developing the skills and confidence needed for independent heating system management. This rotation also prevented the exhaustion that could result from assigning night duties to single individuals for extended periods, ensuring that watchkeepers remained alert and capable of responding effectively to developing situations. The relationship between personal warming through specialized winter clothing and Tipi heating systems created integrated approaches to maintaining body temperature that maximized comfort while conserving fuel resources and ensuring survival during the harshest conditions. Plains, peoples developed sophisticated clothing systems that worked in perfect harmony with their shelter heating technologies to provide comprehensive protection against extreme cold, wind, and temperature fluctuations that characterized plains winters. Inner clothing layers were designed specifically to trap body heat and wick moisture away from the skin, creating personal climate control systems that reduce dependence on external heating while maintaining comfort during various activities. These garments were typically made from soft, carefully treated hides or furs that provided excellent insulation while remaining flexible and comfortable during extended wear in confined teepee spaces. The selection of materials for inner clothing required understanding of how different furs and hides performed under various temperature and humidity conditions. Rabbit fur, when available, provided exceptional softness and warmth for inner garments, while deer and antelope hides offered durability and flexibility that made them suitable for clothing that would receive intensive use throughout long winter months. The construction of inner garments involved techniques that maximized insulation while maintaining freedom of movement necessary for daily activities and fire management tasks. Seaming methods were designed to minimize heat loss through joints, while ensuring that clothing remained durable enough to withstand regular use and washing throughout the winter season. Outer clothing layers provided protection against wind and moisture, while allowing for regulation of body temperature as conditions changed throughout daily cycles and weather patterns. These garments could be added or removed as needed, allowing individuals to maintain optimal comfort both inside heated tipis and during necessary ventures into harsh outdoor environments for fuel gathering and other essential tasks. The design of outer garments required balancing protection against weather with the flexibility needed for active work in challenging conditions. Buffalo robes provided maximum warmth and wind protection, but were heavy and could restrict movement, while lighter garments offered greater mobility but less protection against extreme conditions. Specialized winter footwear was particularly important for maintaining overall body warmth, as cold feet could quickly lead to systemic heat loss despite adequate ambient heating within tipis. Winter moccasins and boots were designed to provide insulation against cold ground contact while remaining comfortable for extended indoor wear during long periods of confinement. The construction of winter footwear involved multiple layers of insulation and waterproofing that protected feet from both cold and moisture, while allowing for the flexibility needed for walking on various winter surfaces. Fur linings provided insulation, while treated hide exteriors shed water and provided durability against rough terrain and harsh conditions. Sleeping clothing was specifically adapted for nighttime use in heated tipis, providing additional insulation during hours when fires burned at lower levels while avoiding overheating during periods of more intensive heating. These garments needed to be comfortable for extended periods of rest, while providing the flexibility needed for normal sleep movement. The design of sleeping garments balanced warmth with comfort, using the softest available materials while incorporating features that prevented heat loss during sleep, without creating excessive bulk that would interfere with rest. Special attention was paid to areas where heat loss was most likely, including openings around the neck, wrists, and ankles. The integration of clothing and shelter heating systems allowed for more efficient use of fuel resources, as personal insulation reduced the heating requirements for maintaining survival temperatures within tipis. This efficiency was particularly important during periods of fuel scarcity or extreme weather, when heating capacity might be limited by available resources or challenging conditions. Clothing maintenance during winter required techniques adapted to confined living conditions and limited resources. Garments needed to be cleaned, repaired, and maintained using materials and methods available within winter camps, while drying and storage techniques were adapted to the humid conditions that could develop inside heated tipis. The coordination of clothing and heating strategies required understanding of how personal insulation affected optimal tipi temperature management. Families learned to adjust their heating intensity based on the clothing worn by family members, achieving comfortable conditions while minimizing fuel consumption and maintaining efficient heating system operation. The relationship between winter nutrition and body heat generation created integrated survival strategies that combined proper diet with effective heating systems to maintain warmth and health through harsh plains winters. The foods consumed during cold months were specifically chosen for their ability to provide sustained energy and support the body's natural heat production mechanisms, while being preserved and stored using techniques adapted to winter living conditions. High-fat foods form the nutritional foundation of winter diets, providing concentrated energy needed to fuel internal heat generation while supplying essential calories for maintaining body functions under stressful conditions. Buffalo meat, particularly fatty portions including marrow and organ meats, supplied essential nutrients while requiring significant metabolic energy to digest, creating internal warmth through the digestion process itself. The preservation of fatty buffalo cuts required specialized techniques that maintain nutritional value and palatability throughout winter storage periods. Pemmican, made from dried lean meat mixed with rendered fat and sometimes berries, provided concentrated nutrition that could be stored safely for months while retaining its energy content and digestibility. Protein-rich foods supported muscle function and metabolic processes that contributed directly to body heat production through increased metabolic activity. Lean meats, dried fish when available from pre-winter trading, and other protein sources were prepared using techniques that preserved their nutritional value while making them suitable for winter storage and consumption. The timing of meals was carefully coordinated with heating routines to maximize warming effects, while conserving fuel and making efficient use of available food resources. Hot foods prepared over central fires provided immediate warming effects that supplemented ambient heating, while contributing to comfortable interior temperatures during meal preparation and consumption periods. Traditional beverages made from native plant materials provided both essential nutrients and direct warming effects that helped maintain body temperature from within. Hot teas brewed from local plants supplied vitamins and minerals that supported immune function while providing fluid warmth that helped regulate body temperature during cold periods. The preparation of hot beverages required understanding of which plants provided beneficial effects and how to process them safely for consumption. Rose hips, when available, provided vitamin C that supported health during winter months, while other plants offered different nutritional and medicinal benefits that helped maintain physical condition during challenging periods. Cooking techniques were adapted to maximize both nutritional value and heating efficiency, using methods that provided hot food while making efficient use of fuel and cooking time. Stewing and other slow cooking methods allowed tough cuts of meat to be made tender, while creating hot, nutritious meals that provided both sustenance and warmth. The social aspects of food preparation and consumption reinforced community bonds while ensuring that all members received adequate nutrition for maintaining body heat and health. Shared cooking activities provided opportunities for social interaction during long winter days while ensuring efficient use of fuel and cooking resources. Food sharing protocols ensured that families with abundant food stores provided assistance to those facing shortages while maintaining community health and survival capabilities. These sharing arrangements were particularly important for ensuring that elderly community members and children received adequate nutrition for maintaining body heat during harsh conditions. The storage and preservation of winter food supplies required techniques that protected nutritional value while preventing spoilage in the humid conditions that could develop inside heated tipis. Food containers and storage methods were designed to maintain food safety while keeping supplies accessible during severe weather, when venturing outside might be dangerous. Emergency food procedures provided alternatives when normal food supplies became inadequate due to harsh weather, unexpected shortages, or other circumstances that threatened adequate nutrition. Knowledge of emergency food sources and preparation techniques could provide crucial supplements when standard food supplies proved insufficient for maintaining health and body heat. The quality of sleep and rest provided by effective Tipi warming systems was essential for both physical survival and mental health during challenging winter months when bodies needed recovery time, while minds required respite from the constant vigilance demanded by survival in harsh conditions. The controlled temperature and comfortable bedding arrangements created conditions that allowed for restorative sleep, despite the threatening environment that lay just beyond the protective hide walls. The consistent warmth maintained by well-managed heating systems prevented sleep disruptions that could result from temperature fluctuations during night hours when outdoor temperatures might drop to dangerous levels. Bodies could remain relaxed and comfortable throughout natural sleep cycles, allowing for the deep rest needed to maintain physical health and mental resilience during demanding winter survival periods. The elimination of cold stress during sleep allowed natural sleep patterns to function properly, supporting both physical recovery and mental processing that helped individuals cope with the challenges and stresses of winter survival. Quality sleep was essential for maintaining the alertness and decision-making capabilities that could mean the difference between successful survival and dangerous mistakes. Sleeping arrangements were carefully designed to maximize both warmth sharing and individual comfort while respecting family privacy and cultural protocols. Family members positioned themselves on communal bedding to take advantage of shared body heat while maintaining enough personal space for restful sleep and appropriate family relationships. The soft, insulating properties of buffalo robes and other fur bedding created comfortable sleeping surfaces that cushioned bodies against hard ground, while providing effective thermal barriers against cold that could seep up from frozen earth. Multiple layers of bedding allowed families to adjust insulation according to changing nighttime temperatures and individual comfort preferences. Bedding arrangements required understanding of how different materials performed under various conditions and how to layer them for maximum effectiveness. Buffalo robes provided primary insulation and comfort, while additional furs and hides could be added for extra warmth during especially cold periods or arranged to provide optimal comfort for different family members. The security provided by effective heating systems contributed significantly to peaceful sleep by reducing anxiety about survival and safety that could interfere with natural rest patterns. Families could sleep knowing that their heating systems would continue to function throughout the night, providing warmth needed to survive until morning when fires could be rebuilt and maintained. The psychological comfort of warm, secure sleeping environments helped maintain mental health and emotional stability during periods of stress and confinement that could otherwise contribute to depression, anxiety, and social conflict. Quality sleep supported emotional regulation and stress management that were essential for maintaining family harmony during challenging winter months. Dreams and sleep quality were influenced by the stable, comfortable environment created by successful Tipi heating, allowing for natural sleep processes that supported both physical recovery and mental processing of daily experiences. The absence of cold stress and discomfort permitted normal sleep architecture that contributed to overall health and well-being. The social aspects of shared sleeping spaces required careful management to ensure that warmth sharing did not interfere with individual sleep quality or family privacy. Cultural protocols governing sleeping arrangements balanced practical heating considerations with social requirements and personal comfort needs. Sleep schedules were often adapted to winter conditions and heating requirements, with some family members maintaining different sleep patterns to ensure continuous fire monitoring and heating system maintenance. These arrangements required coordination to ensure that everyone received adequate rest, while essential survival tasks were performed throughout night hours. The transition between sleep and waking was made more comfortable by maintained warmth that allowed family members to begin daily activities without the shock of extreme temperature changes. The gentle warming environment supported natural waking patterns, while providing comfort during the vulnerable transition periods when bodies adjusted from sleep to active states. The gradual transition from intensive winter warming strategies to spring preparations for seasonal movement marked a critical period in the annual cycle of plains life, when communities needed to balance continued heating needs against requirements for preparing equipment and resources for renewed mobility. This transition required careful timing and considerable skill to ensure that families remained warm and safe while beginning the complex preparations necessary for successful spring migration. The recognition of approaching spring depended on careful observation of subtle environmental cues that indicated changing seasons and improving weather conditions. Experienced community members monitored wind patterns, temperature fluctuations, wildlife behavior, and other indicators that suggested winter's grip was beginning to weaken and conditions might soon permit renewed travel. Temperature patterns provided important clues about seasonal transitions, but plains weather was notorious for sudden changes that could bring dangerous cold even during apparent warming periods. Communities needed to distinguish between temporary warm spells and genuine seasonal changes that indicated winter was ending and spring travel could begin safely. Wildlife behavior offered reliable indicators of seasonal change that experienced observers could interpret to predict weather trends and optimal timing for spring activities. The return of migratory birds, changes in local animal behavior, and other biological indicators provided information about environmental conditions that supplemented temperature and weather observations. The reduction of heating intensity was managed gradually to avoid premature exposure to late winter cold snaps that could still threaten survival, even during apparent warming periods. Families maintained full heating capabilities while beginning to reduce fuel consumption and modify daily routines in preparation for the increased activity levels that would characterize spring preparation and travel. Fuel conservation during the transition period balanced continued heating needs against the requirement to preserve remaining supplies for emergency use during spring travel or unexpected weather reversals. Families needed to maintain adequate heating capacity while beginning to prepare equipment and supplies for transportation to new seasonal camping areas. Equipment, maintenance and preparation during spring transition focused on preparing heating systems for storage and transport while ensuring continued functionality during the critical transition period. Tipi covers were inspected for winter damage and repaired as needed. Pole frameworks were checked for structural integrity, and heating accessories were cleaned and prepared for packing. The timing of equipment preparation required balancing continued heating needs against the necessity of preparing materials for transport. Families needed to maintain functional heating systems while beginning the complex work of evaluating, repairing, and preparing equipment for the upcoming season of travel and temporary camping. Storage preparation for heating system components involved techniques for protecting materials during spring travel and summer storage, while ensuring they would be ready for use during the next winter season. Hides needed to be treated to prevent deterioration, poles required protection against damage, and other components were prepared for long-term storage. The psychological transition from winter to spring required adjustment to changing daily routines, social patterns, and activity levels that would characterize the return to nomadic lifestyle. Families that had adapted to confined, intensive cooperation during winter survival needed to prepare for more dispersed, mobile patterns of seasonal migration and summer activities. Planning for the upcoming year began during spring transition periods, when families evaluated their winter survival experience and identified improvements needed for future cold seasons. This reflection and planning process ensured that lessons learned during winter would be incorporated into future survival strategies and equipment preparations. Community coordination during spring transition involved organizing departure timing, travel routes, and destination planning that would optimize opportunities for spring hunting while ensuring all families were prepared for safe travel. These decisions required balancing individual family readiness with community needs and opportunities. The successful completion of winter survival represented a crucial educational milestone for young people, providing them with both practical skills and confidence needed to contribute meaningfully to family and community survival efforts, while preparing them for eventual leadership roles in maintaining traditional survival strategies. Each winter offered intensive learning opportunities that transformed children into capable contributors to family welfare and community survival. Young people who had successfully participated in their first complete winter survival cycle gained recognition within their communities for growing competence and reliability in essential survival skills. This recognition encouraged continued learning while providing motivation for mastering the increasingly complex skills and responsibilities that would characterize their adult roles in winter survival efforts. The completion of first winters marked important transitions in social status and community responsibility that reflected recognition of developing survival capabilities. Young people who had demonstrated competence in basic heating system management, fuel conservation, and emergency response began to receive greater responsibilities and increased respect from family and community members. The teaching process emphasized development of both technical knowledge and practical judgment needed to make critical decisions under pressure when standard procedures might prove inadequate for unusual or extreme conditions. Young people learned not only how to perform essential tasks, but also how to recognize changing conditions and adapt techniques accordingly. Advanced skill development included specialized techniques for extreme weather survival, emergency repair procedures, and complex social skills needed to maintain harmony during stressful winter conditions when family tensions could threaten group survival. These advanced skills distinguished experienced practitioners from basic competency levels and prepared young people for leadership roles. Gender-specific skill development was taught within the context of comprehensive winter survival knowledge that ensured both boys and girls understood complete heating systems while developing specialized expertise in assigned areas. Of responsibility. This comprehensive education provided flexibility and redundancy in family skill sets while respecting traditional role divisions. Male-focused training typically emphasized structural maintenance, fuel gathering, and exterior heating system management that required physical strength and exposure to harsh outdoor conditions. Young men learned to maintain Tipi frameworks, adjust smoke flap systems, and perform heavy labor associated with fuel collection and equipment maintenance. Female-focused education concentrated on interior heating system management, resource conservation, and social coordination that required detailed knowledge of heating efficiency, material properties, and family dynamics during extended confinement periods. Young women mastered bedding arrangement, airflow management, and the complex social skills needed for successful winter community life. The integration of young people into adult survival responsibilities was managed carefully to provide meaningful learning opportunities without compromising family safety or survival effectiveness. Youth gradually assumed greater responsibilities as their skills developed, eventually becoming capable of maintaining heating systems independently and contributing fully to family survival efforts. Mentorship relationships between experienced adults and developing youth provided individualized instruction and guidance that supplemented general family education efforts. These relationships ensured that specialized knowledge and advanced techniques were transmitted effectively, while providing young people with role models and sources of advice during their skill development. Testing and evaluation of developing skills occurred naturally through gradually increased responsibilities and exposure to challenging conditions that allowed young people to demonstrate competence while providing opportunities for additional instruction when needed. This process ensured that skills were thoroughly developed before full independence was achieved. The recognition of adult competency marked important transitions in family and community relationships that reflected successful completion of education processes and readiness for full participation in winter survival. Responsibilities. These transitions provided young people with confidence and community recognition that supported their continued development and eventual leadership roles. The ability of warm Tipis to sustain continued social relationships and community bonds, despite winter isolation, was crucial for maintaining the social fabric that supported Plains communities throughout their annual cycles. The protection and comfort provided by effective heating systems created conditions where families could continue to interact positively, despite stresses of winter survival, resource scarcity, and extended confinement in small spaces. Inter-family visiting was made possible by the availability of warm, comfortable spaces where neighbors could gather for social interaction, shared activities, and mutual support during the challenging winter months. These visits provided essential relief from potential monotony of winter confinement, while maintaining relationships that were essential for community cooperation and assistance during emergencies. The hosting of visitors required careful resource management and space arrangement that demonstrated community values, while ensuring that hospitality did not compromise host family survival capabilities. Families developed techniques for accommodating guests that maximized comfort while conserving fuel and maintaining heating effectiveness for all occupants. Shared activities during winter visits included storytelling, game playing, craft work, and other pursuits that provided entertainment while strengthening social bonds and transmitting cultural knowledge. These activities were adapted to confined spaces and limited resources, while maintaining their effectiveness for community building and cultural transmission. The sharing of warm spaces for community activities allowed for continuation of cultural practices that might otherwise be suspended during harsh weather when outdoor gatherings were impossible. Ceremonies, meetings, and other group activities could take place in heated environments that maintained community cohesion and shared identity during challenging periods. Communication between families was facilitated by ability to venture outside briefly when necessary, while knowing that warm refuge was always available nearby. This limited mobility allowed for exchange of information, resources, and assistance that kept communities functioning effectively throughout winter seasons when normal communication patterns were disrupted. Conflict resolution was easier in comfortable environments where stress from cold and discomfort did not exacerbate interpersonal tensions that could develop during extended periods of close confinement. The physical comfort provided by effective heating systems contributed to emotional stability and patience that made it easier to maintain positive relationships during challenging times. Community decision-making during winter required adaptation to confined conditions and limited mobility while maintaining democratic processes and inclusive participation. Warm meeting spaces allowed for extended discussions and consensus building that might be impossible in uncomfortable conditions or when weather prevented normal gathering patterns. The maintenance of cultural traditions during winter confinement required adaptation to limited space and resources, while preserving essential elements of community identity and shared values. Heating systems provided the comfortable conditions necessary for extended cultural activities, while allowing for modification of traditional practices to suit winter circumstances. Family relationship management during extended confinement required special skills and attention to prevent conflicts that could threaten both social harmony and survival effectiveness. The warm, comfortable environment created by effective heating systems provided foundation for positive family interactions, while reducing environmental stresses that could contribute to interpersonal difficulties. The continuation of educational and skill transmission activities during winter ensured that community knowledge was preserved and transmitted, despite reduced mobility and activity levels. Warm, comfortable gathering spaces provided ideal conditions for detailed instruction and practice that might be difficult to achieve during more active seasons. Youth socialization during winter months required structured activities and interactions that maintained normal social development, despite confined conditions and limited contact with peers from other families. Community gathering opportunities in warm spaces provided essential social experiences for developing young people.